Well, thank you for that kind introduction. When David contacted me about speaking at LI, I was very excited. I'd kind of been waiting for the invitation all year, and this is the one group I wanted to speak to. When I first finished college, I really didn't know what I want to do. I know there's a lot of young people in the room, and I was trying to figure out what the good Lord was calling me to do. I didn't know. I didn't want to go to grad school at that time. I was considering law school. I decided not to go to law school. And my brother, who had been involved in the Leadership Institute's campus publishing newspaper program, kept telling me about this thing called Leadership Institute. You should really go there and get some training. And I did, and it was just an eye-opening experience for me. It really, my love of politics was just fostered and encouraged. And I decided to go work on Capitol Hill. The Leadership Institute helped me get that first internship on Capitol Hill. And I started, getting involved in politics, and I felt the call to run for office. After all those trainings at the Leadership Institute, I used to say I'd taken every school LI has to offer. They kept coming up with new schools, so I don't know if I can quite say that now, but I've taken most of them. And frankly, I require everybody on my staff to go to the Leadership Institute and get their training, whether they're campaign staff or congressional staff, because I want the mindset of LI in my staff, because it's grassroots oriented, it's conservative values, and it's all the things we're supposed to do. Some people, you're all political activists or you wouldn't be here, but a lot of folks think they know something about how to win campaigns and how to run elections. And they think it's something like run a few TV ads and, talk to your friends at the Chamber of Commerce and that's it. And that's not how you win elections. And it's not how you govern either. So I really appreciate all the Leadership Institute has to do. I went to college and then I got elected. I lived in Frederick, Maryland. When my father got out of Vietnam, he got a job at a military base, Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, as a computer guy. So at the age of 1, I wound up in Frederick, Maryland. And after getting all the LI training, decided to run for the state senate. I was only 26 years old. I was the youngest senator in the state. And very few people thought I would win, frankly. But I took the LI training very seriously. I had it just stuck in my head, completely ingrained. And I kept knocking on doors like I was told by people who had run successful campaigns before you had to do. Kept knocking on doors and knocking on doors. I also raised money. And I won, it was an upset victory at the time. I served for 12 years. And I like to say I'm a West Virginian by choice. Frederick, Maryland borders West Virginia, so I hopped across the Potomac River to West Virginia, and I waited to see who was going to run for Congress. Nobody else was running there that I thought was strong, particularly on the Republican side. It was an open seat. So again, I took that training from the Leadership Institute, and frankly, they're encouraging volunteers. One of the things LI does so well is trains people how to be good volunteers on a campaign, any kind of campaign. We're not all called to run for office. But we're all called to get involved somehow. Again, I know I'm preaching to the choir because you're here, but I always say, at an absolute minimum, you got to vote. And you got a lot of friends, probably family, relatives, neighbors, that don't vote. They just don't see the value of voting, especially in non-presidential years. Races like mine last year, there was nobody on the presidential ballot. Some people don't even vote, and that's your basic right and duty, and it's quite shameful. But beyond voting, it doesn't end there. You can convince others to vote. You can work on a campaign, you can donate, you can get involved in so many different ways. Even folks that can't vote, that are under the age of 18, I know there's Generation Joshua folks here. I've worked with Generation Joshua on several campaigns, including my last one, and these folks can't even vote themselves, but they're affecting lots of votes by getting out there, knocking on doors, making those phone calls, handing out the literature at the churches, and really turning elections. I won my election by 3 percentage points this last one. So, you're out there scraping for every vote. So really excited about being here and speaking really what I consider the premier conservative training organization in the country. They're constant, they're doing it, they know what they're doing, and they're always available to do it. Morton's been a mentor of mine for years since I worked for him. I still call him on a regular basis when I have to make a key decision, and I really appreciate his accessibility. David Fenner's a long friend of mine, Steve Sutton, who works here. These guys are committed to the conservative movement, and that's who's running this organization. So I appreciate your support of LI. I wanted to reflect a little bit, and I'm going to leave time for questions, on basically what I've learned my first year in Congress. I'm a fast learner, I believe, and I'm very active. And I used to run the state party, too. When I lived in Maryland, I was the chairman of the state Republican Party, in addition to being a state senator for 12 years. So I come at this job as a congressman from a very kind of a seasoned political background. And it's dysfunctional, frankly. I know, folks, you read that in the papers all the time, dysfunctional. It's easy just to say that, but you got to ask why. Like, how is that happening? What's the problem? Where is the dysfunction occurring? Now, for starters, I'll just say this up front. The President of the United States is a powerful position. The President of the United States can veto bills. He's the commander-in-chief of the military. He's got the bully pulpit. He can go and give a speech, and the press will report word for word what he says and try to control the media that way. He's got a friendly ear in the liberal media, frankly. And so that's a powerful position. But that's no excuse for Congress not to do their job. And I feel I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives to fight back against that guy. And having been in the minority party for 12 years when I was a state senator, I was pretty excited about being in the majority party because you can pass your bills. You can get stuff done. You can govern. You can do it. And to see the majority party not do that effectively against Obama is quite frustrating for me. And see, it's Article 1, Section 7. Article 1, Section 7. We all need to be reminded of that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the U.S. House of Representatives. President Obama can't spend unless the chamber in which I serve authorizes that and spends it. We have the power of the purse in the U.S. House of Representatives. I campaigned on this, ladies and gentlemen. West Virginia is being decimated, particularly by Obama's war on coal. And, the voters, I used to, I say I'm West Virginia by choice. I used to live in a different state. People weren't skeptical necessarily as to why I chose to live in West Virginia. I love living in West Virginia. You can live anywhere. It's still a free country. Obama hasn't stopped that yet. You're still free to live anywhere you want to live. And I chose to move to West Virginia. I'm proud of that. People were skeptical as to whether or not any individual member of Congress can make a difference at all. How can you, as one of 435 members of Congress, how are you going to make a difference? That was the question I got the most often, particularly in the primary. I had a 7-way primary I had to battle through before I had to get to the general election. And my answer was simple. It was the power of the purse. I would say the power of the purse rests with Congress. If we wanted to stop Obama's war on coal, his creating laws all the time through the EPA, Department of Interior, making up new laws that he does not have the authority to do, you just take the funding out. You just put a rider in the appropriations bills and you stop them. We have the authority to do that. In fact, that's our duty to do that. And this isn't even a partisan statement. Whether the president's a Democrat or Republican and Congress is Republican or Democrat, the founders of our country in that Constitution specifically gave power of the purse to Congress so that the President of the United States doesn't make himself a king or a dictator. This is how we save our country. This is what we have to do in Congress. It may not be comfortable because as soon as you do that, the president will use his press and Harry Reid will filibuster everything. And all they do is blame Republicans for shutting down government. They are just passionate. It's not logical. It's not true. But all they do is blame Republicans. So unless we get to the point where we're willing to stand up for the truth, use our duty and say, well, of course we're going to fund government. We're going to fund it the regular way. We're going to pass the appropriations bills. We're going to fund what the taxpayers should fund. We're not going to fund what the taxpayers should not fund. And that includes not funding the war on coal, not funding Planned Parenthood, not funding a whole lot of things that the left would like funded, but the voters gave us the right not to fund. In fact, the duty not to fund those things. If they wanted those things funded, they could have elected a liberal Democrat Congress, but they didn't. So we have a divided government, and we have that power, and by goodness, we ought to use it. So I bring a few displays. I'm going to run through these. I'm going to leave time for questions because it's become easier for me to sort of explain what we're up against and what we're doing when I have some show and tell here. So Reiner on my staff is going to help me with this. I'm on the budget committee. Can you do the one with the revenue coming in? How much revenue we have coming in every year? Does anybody know how much revenue we had? The numbers for 2014 are all in. So the money, tax money of all kind. No, the one that says the 3.01. Yeah. So this being on the budget committee, they put a lot of freshmen on the budget committee because it's good to just learn how the whole process is supposed to work. Not necessarily how it does work, but how it's supposed to work. So this is how much money this country brought in 2014. Your tax dollars, all forms of taxes, payroll taxes, income taxes, fees, everything. Our country brought in, and you can see it's divided up, $3.02 trillion is what we brought in 2014. Individual income, Social Security, insurance, other corporate income tax. Of course, the left just wants to raise the corporate income tax and tax the so-called rich. But the problem with that is that corporations go overseas and people work less. So the left has no answer to this issue. In fact, their answer makes it worse because it drives people out of the workforce and overseas. So the left has no idea how to increase revenue. But that's what we brought in 2014. This is a fact. Republicans and Democrats agree with this number. There's no debate about it. It's just a fact. We brought in $3.02 trillion. So put that one down. Let's bring in how much we spent. Anybody know how much we spent in 2014? You're all pretty close. More, right? Somebody said more, right? You get the idea. It was more. I think 3.8 is very close, a little bit over the number. No, do the one that says how much we spent. It's 3.5. So the one that says 3.5, Reiner. 3.5. So that's where it all comes from. And I can do this display to grade school kids. It's not that hard to figure out the problem here, right? 3 trillion coming in, 3.5 trillion going out. The problem is $500 billion. And we're spending $500 billion more than we take in. And Republicans have ideas, or conservatives, I should say, have ideas to fix this, for which we get viciously attacked. But the problem's obvious. And that's how it's all spent. Now, the note about this, I have some other displays that show this a little bit more. The red is mandatory spending. Mandatory means I don't vote on it. If you qualify, Social Security, Medicaid, you name it, the checks automatically go out. So when the liberals get up and say, oh, government shutdown, people aren't going to get the Social Security checks, it's a total lie. Social Security checks are issued automatically. We don't affect that. Discretionary is the blue part. About half of the discretionary spending is the defense, and the non-discretionary is everything else. So that's just where it's spent. I think before you know how to fix the problem, you first have to diagnose the problem. So what I'm doing here is diagnosing the problem. I'm not necessarily going to get into all the fixes. I have some ideas about how to deal with the dysfunction, but I wanted to just diagnose the problem for you. I've been doing this talk around my state and everywhere I can because people know there's a problem, but I just want to lay it out exactly what's happening. And bring up the mandatory spending chart of the three mandatories. The chairman of my committee, Tom Price of Georgia, is really making an issue about the mandatory spending. Congress did not used to have 2/3 of government being mandatory spent. It used to be the other way around. And the duty of Congress is to oversee the spending of your tax dollars, making sure it's being spent the way you want it to be spent. So in 1965, that's the year Medicare was created, 1965. By the way, I like to say this one. The average age in 1965, anybody know how old the average human being lived in 1965? Yeah, you've been studying too much. It's 70, yes, 70. You guessed it right up. So the average human being lived till 70 in 1965. It was a 5-year program, right? The average age today? The statistic, you're all very close. The statistic I saw, I heard the woman said 84. Women do live a little longer. So actually, Chris Christie, I saw him give a town hall meeting, and I think he said it was 78 for men and 83 for women. But the number I saw in the budget committee was 79.6 when you put the men and women together. So that's about 80, say. So it was designed to be for folks that live to 70. Now we live to 80. And that's great. Hey, we all want to live longer. I read in an article, people being born today are going to live to 100. Okay, so that's great. Demographics are changing. We're living longer. Wonderful, right? But actuarially, you have to adjust for those type of things. You have a program that's designed for 5 years, and it's for 15 years. You're getting the benefits. And the revenue coming in is about $140 billion. We're spending about $130 billion. We're spending about $390 billion a year. So if you look at it actuarially, we're actually spending about triple what we're bringing in because we're giving triple the years of benefits. That's what's happening with Medicare. And when Paul Ryan suggested some fix to this, I saw it myself the other day, the one with Paul Ryan pushing grandma off the cliff because he wanted to reform Medicare in the last campaign. They run an ad saying you want to kill your grandmother. I mean, this is the liberal answer. As soon as you have any solution, they personally attack you and say you hate old people, you hate everybody, according to what they're going to say. But here's a problem with mandatory spending. Let's do the positive one. Remember the positive one with the revenue and all that? I like to say that my speech tends to be very negative, so I came up with at least one handout that's positive. Depends on how you look at it. But there is a positive thing here because you hear people on the campaign trail today. You hear John Kasich, who was chairman of the Budget Committee, the committee I serve on. You hear him in his town hall meeting saying when he was chairman of the Budget Committee, he balanced the budget. Does anybody know if that's true or not? You never quite know whether it's true or not, right? And you hear Bill Clinton of all people, saying all Republicans talk all this game. When I was president, I balanced the budget. Anybody know if that's true or not? It's actually true. It's actually true. Both statements are actually true. So here's the chart. I mean, in 1974, when the Budget Act was created, you see the outlays was blue. We almost spent more than we took in. In those 2 years, 1999 and 2000, for those 2 years, there was a time where the revenues were higher than the outlays. And then, Republicans were in control then. We started spending more. 9/11 attack occurred. And it started spending more than Democrats took over in 2008. And you see the spike there of the differential. But I bring that up because it can be done. It's painful. Newt Gingrich was elected Speaker of the House in 1994. There was a huge battle with Bill Clinton in 1995. They battled and battled and battled. They finally agreed on a budget deal. And the economy was a little better than expected. So instead of balancing in 8 or 9 or 10 years, it actually balanced in 4 years. And we had a 2-year balanced budget, and then we lost our discipline. But I like to show that because it is possible. I mean, we're going very much the wrong direction now, but it is possible to balance the budget. What else do I have there? Which ones haven't I shown yet? So I diagnosed the problem. Do the appropriations one. So let me get back to the dysfunction, and then I'll go ahead and take some questions. But the way government's supposed to work is you pass a budget. I'm on the budget committee. Then the authorizing committees authorize what's legal to spend money on and what's not. Then last but not least, the appropriations committee cuts the checks. So there's designed to be 3 checks and balances. And if you follow the system, it's a good system, I believe, because the taxpayers have their checks and balances in there. The problem is we don't follow the system. We actually passed a budget last year. It was the first budget that balances without raising taxes in 14 years. Okay, and I know you have families and businesses. You used to balance budgets. The federal government has not been working that way, and really it takes 10 years to balance it, and you've got to stick to the 10-year plan. So it's something that needs to be done. But you got to pass a budget. You got to stick to the budget, and then you got to have the authorizing committees, and then last is the appropriations. Government's broken into 12 functions of government when we appropriate. So what's supposed to happen is us, the House of Representatives, to control that power of the purse given to us in Article 1, Section 7, to make sure your tax dollars are being used the way the voters want, as we go through each of those departments, and we fund what we think we should fund, and we do not fund the things we should not fund. Became very frustrating to me because I spent basically 3 weeks in September when the funding was going to run out last September. September 30th is generally the cutoff for the funding deadlines. The reporters would come to me and ask one question. Do you want to shut down government to defund Planned Parenthood? That's the only question I got asked by the reporters for 3 weeks. That's all they would ask me. And it's going to start again now. It's going to start again right now. It's just going to keep happening. Do you want to shut down government to defund Planned Parenthood, or name the issue, whatever the issues we're fighting on? It'll be this gun control stuff that Obama's doing now by executive order. They're going to say, are you willing to shut down government for that? So I disagree with the premise of the question. One, we're not shutting down government. We're spending the way we should spend. Harry Reid's filibustering stuff and trying to shut down government, one. And two, it's not simply over Planned Parenthood. Of course, taxpayer dollars should not be used for abortion, but taxpayer dollars should not be used for the war on coal and various other regulations that the president is imposing by executive order, because that's the job of Congress, see the power of the purse. So what they're really asking me is, do I believe in Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution? And the answer is yes, I believe in Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution, that we have the power of the purse. And I think the taxpayers should not fund certain things. I also think we should balance the budget. That's why I went through the budget presentation. We have a $500 billion gap. We're struggling to balance that. And I think that the people of this country want a balanced budget. Yes, I believe that. But the press doesn't ask the question that way. We just have to know how to answer it correctly. My colleagues need to know that, because I was hearing, earlier last year, and I would get up and talk about the issues. The Democrat side would get up, and they would have charts just like this. By the way, this is the exact size of the charts that are used on the U.S. House floor. If you ever turn in the C-SPAN for you big junkies and somebody's talking, you can have a display. That's the displays that we use. These are used exactly that size. So the left would have these displays, and it would say we were fighting over Homeland Security and executive amnesty at the time in February. And the left had these charts, and it said 15 days till Republican-led government shutdown. The next day, they'd all get up, 14 days till Republican-led government shutdown, 13 days. So all they were doing was trying to frame the debate that Republicans were responsible for any form of government shutdown. And unfortunately, some of my colleagues, including the former speaker, would take that blame on themselves unnecessarily, because we're not. We passed a bill to fund Homeland Security. We just didn't fund executive amnesty because the President of the United States can't make up laws. It's our job to stop that. Those bills were being filibustered in the U.S. Senate at the time by Harry Reid. So the Harry Reid was actually causing the government shutdown. And we did not, in my view, do a good enough job exposing that. Rather than fighting the media bias and the way that it was misportrayed, too many people want to cave in. They're afraid of that battle. This is what it all comes down to, because I know you're frustrated. I've talked to conservatives around the country, and particularly in West Virginia, very frustrated. Why? Why aren't you guys fighting back? Why? Look, I'm not excusing it, but I'll tell you, if you want an answer why some people don't want to fight back, they are petrified. Folks in my own party are petrified of a government shutdown and being blamed for that government shutdown. And frankly, it didn't help at all when the former speaker would say that he's not going to allow a government shutdown, because that takes the blame on yourself. So now you have your own party blaming you for something. I will tell you the new speaker has not said that. I've been at press conferences where Speaker Paul Ryan has been asked, are you going to do like John Boehner and say absolutely no government shutdowns? And Paul Ryan would not say that. He would say, we're going to go to regular order. That's what's called regular order. We're going to get back to regular order. We're going to pass appropriations bills. We're going to do it the right way. That's what Speaker Ryan is saying. As long as he does that, he's going to have a lot of support from guys like me to do this the right way. You go through all 12 of these bills. The first one's defense. We usually pass that first. On the Budget Committee, we're supposed to pass the budget next month in February, and the defense bill will be the first appropriations bill we pass. Once we get that passed and through on the president's desk, the president can sign or veto bills, okay? And we can override bills. So this is basic. Defense bills are not normally that partisan. You can have a bipartisan majority. You can pass defense bills. You could override a presidential veto if you had to. At least we'd try to. But if we pass the defense bill first, that's half of the appropriations right there. So one of the fears of the omnibus that we did just a couple months ago is you put all 12 of these bills into one category, and if it doesn't pass, it all shuts down. And then, military folks' paychecks are affected and things like that. So it's crucial that we pass these one at a time, starting with defense. Get that off the table. Fund the military. That's a good role of government. Then you've got the VAs in there, a separate bill, military construction and veterans affairs. You have transportation in there. Labor and HHS, you can pass a lot of these that are not really that partisan or controversial. Then you get down to, say, like the EPA, which is, if you look at that, EPA is 3.7% of the budget. And Harry Reid may filibuster it, Obama may veto it, which would cause a stoppage of the EPA's functions. Well, I'm not sure that that's as big of an issue to conservatives as some of these other things. So, no, believe me, the left knows that. The left knows that. They know if you start passing these appropriations bills one at a time, and you get down and you start fighting over the environmental regulations, they're not in a winning position. They feel they're in a winning position when they jam us, filibuster everything, and try to push us to continuing resolutions or omnibuses, which is putting all 12 bills into one. But that's not the way government's supposed to function. So when you hear about getting back to regular order, this is what it's all about. So Speaker Ryan is dedicated to this. Okay, there's going to be resistance from within his own party. There's going to be resistance in the press, but he's dedicated to this. Harry Reid claims he's going to go along with it, but only if there's no riders he doesn't like, which means he's not going to go along with it, frankly, because there are going to be riders to stop the war on coal, to stop all sorts of regulations the president's doing. So this is the battle we're facing. I think with that, I might as well just go ahead to questions at this point. Anybody, questions, comments? Yeah, thank you. Oh boy. Do you want me to pick?